all of us can write. All of us can write one of my blog posts, right? But do certain people enjoy it more than others? Certain people more efficient at it? Are certain people just able to do it in a way that they could write 300 of these, 400 of these in 3 years? Then that number, that funnel, because they're growth people, funnel gets a lot smaller. And for everyone, when it comes to content creation, everyone can do it. But like, what's your version where you are the 0.1% plus your own personal flavor that makes it stand out? So growth, simply put, and I share this with my team as well, is make number go up, right? That's it, right? And if you think about it so simply, anyone can focus on growth. Anyone can be a growth practitioner, right? Growth is making number go up, the quantified self, whatever, or maybe optimizing that number, right? So make number go up. And I think that's a really good baseline, like super simplified baseline definition.
GM, and welcome to the OGC podcast. We are going beyond the obvious in this show and explore what actually works in crypto growth. I'm Norman, and in each episode, I sit down with the builders, marketers, and operators who are shaping how projects scale in Web3. Today, I'm joined by TPan, also known as Thomas, and he's head of growth at Milk Road, one of crypto's most successful newsletters out there. And he brings serious Web2 growth experience into our space. And he's nowadays focusing on, building a newsletter and a media brand that thousands and tens of and hundreds of thousands of people read pretty much every week. So welcome to the show, TPan.
Norman, thanks for having me. Good to see you again and excited to chat and catch up.
Yes. I'm also super, super excited about this. I think there's many things to explore and to chat about. You've done some amazing stuff in the past. And but before we jump into all of that, maybe, give the listeners a little bit of an intro, quick background about yourself, and tell us what you've been up to over the last couple of years.
Totally. So background has been in growth and marketing related roles. I started in mobile gaming, then went over to rideshare, then a few different industries in the tech space, fintech, health tech, entertainment tech. And that really helped me to better understand what not only growth is, but more specifically what growth looks like at in various products, industries, and business models, and primarily focusing on mobile and B2C, which was a little bit more, particularly on the mobile side, was a little bit more on the frontier in terms of formats and sort of different ad tech stacks and things like that, and even user acquisition, what that looked like. And span primarily focusing on user acquisition paid, and then expanded more into broader growth and collaborating cross-functioning with different teams into more leadership roles. And, coming from that type of background, how did I get into Web3? How did I get into crypto? Everyone has their own unique story. For me, it was actually as a consumer in 2021, where I was still very much in that sort of COVID phase, and spending a lot more time at home. I discovered NFTs through Dapper Labs, and NBA Top Shot was a crazy, crazy time. You can make fun of me, or the audience can make fun of me, but I still am very much an NFT maxi, I think. But I like to say I swam upstream. Went from NFTs to better understanding just through the blockchains themselves. Already dabbled in crypto in terms of holding some, but really didn't really think much more of it beyond that, and didn't realize there can be applications. And so better understood DeFi, infrastructure, other things. Had a stint working at the Ethereum Foundation under a couple of specific teams, working with builders, grantees, and also one of the projects that has since graduated into an independent entity, which is really cool to see Ethereum Foundation sort of evolve over the years. And during that time, because I was so interested and passionate about what was going on in Web3 or the application layer, I realized there's a lot of interesting things from the growth levers or marketing and how it was being approached from the grassroots side, but also what blockchain enabled, on top of my Web2 background on that front. So I started a blog newsletter, whatever you want to call it, called Web3 with TPan. Grew that from just very organically. Even though I'm a growth guy, I almost intentionally treated it as a journal that sort of took a life of its own and made it more sustainable for myself. But grew that to about 8,000 subs and a good, like a couple thousand followers on the Substack side because they separate out those types of metrics and engaged users. So about 10,000 in total. Um, it was just a newsletter, didn't even really do X or other other platforms, even though I should have. But it turned into a place where I could just share a lot of my observations, even personal experiences, to an audience that wanted to see the industry, particularly potentially from their perspective as operators, marketers, growth folks, and combine and overlap those two worlds. What does growth in Web3, growth in crypto, growth in the on chain application or economy space actually look like? And how can you mix and match or create different combinations of the tried and true in the Web2 world and the emergent, interesting, novel, maybe even ephemeral? And many of the things are ephemeral to a degree in Web3, crypto, and the on chain piece.
You've shared a lot there already. A great introduction. A lot to pick up there. Why don't we start maybe like super high level? You came into Web3, had various growth roles in Web2, and as you've shared, you've structured your thoughts a little bit and shared your observations in the newsletter. Now you're in a big media brand there. But yeah, maybe let's zoom out. Like, what's your view, even outside of Milk Road, like even outside of anything? How do you view, now being a few years in the space, how do you view Web3 growth? What is it to you, and how do you see it today? And maybe also in comparison to Web2 standards.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll take it even one step more zoomed out slightly, and I'll start with growth. I think it's good to have a little bit more of a reflective state, especially with someone that has a little more experience. And I certainly still have a lot to learn, but have been around the block, have been working at different companies, various sizes, stages, industries, etc. And simply put, what is growth? And I'm not going to get too philosophical. I love to explain things in more simple terms or analogies and things like that. So growth, simply put, and I share this with my team as well, is make number go up, right? That's it, right? And if you think about it so simply, anyone can focus on growth. Anyone can be a growth practitioner. It doesn't even have to be related to work, right? Growth is making number go up, the quantified self, whatever, or maybe optimizing that number, right? So make number go up. And I think that's a really good baseline, like super simplified baseline definition. But I think the other piece, especially I've learned from different experiences too, and I think anyone in crypto and Web3 would probably resonate with this, is it's not just make number go up, but make number go up sustainably, right? What does that mean? If one number goes up, let's say if you're a blockchain or let's say in DeFi or you're an app like TVL, great. The number ideally maybe wants to be really big, but is it sustainable? Over 3 months, does it go up to 1 billion and then go back down to 10 million, right? There's growth, but was there sustainable growth? Well, partial credit at best, probably don't even check that box. Many other things apply to all those different types of metrics, right? If one number goes up or is maximized at local maxima, does that impact other numbers, right? What is that holistic impact? So going back to your actual question, where's that overlap on Web 2 versus Web 3? Where's that influence? What's going on? Where are the tectonic plates shifting? And it's fun because in this conversation, I know I will look back on a lot of what I've written and the observations, and now I'm much more in the weeds with a company that's sort of operating across a space in different ways and in its own unique way. I think if I were to give more of an overview of this, it's we're seeing the pendulum swing both ways, right? And what I mean by that, I like to use the example of a pendulum, or just that analogy, because I think there's in life, a lot of things happen, or like there's this new fad, there's this, the price of a certain cryptocurrency goes up and skyrockets all of a sudden out of nowhere because of some narrative. The pendulum will eventually swing to the other way. I'm not saying that means the price will go back down to zero or something, but rather momentum is going really fast. That momentum will probably slow down, right? Or it will sort of go to a mean reversion type of situation. So again, applying that concept back to Web 2 and Web 3 growth, we're seeing over the past few years a lot of interesting things be emphasized in Web 3 and crypto growth in terms of tactics and strategies. A very simple example is like community-led growth, right? Also driven by other things. And then now we're seeing, okay, there still are some community-led growth tactics and strategies that work really well. You're not exactly seeing that much of a like, this is the baseline, everyone needs to do it this way type of thing. So in the meantime, what we're seeing as well is there's a lot more interest because of the type of companies that are succeeding, the types of verticals within Web3 and crypto that are more sustainable, at least currently with what we're seeing and where we are, lend and be inspired by the best practices from sort of Web 2, whether it's neobanks taking from the previous generation of neobanks and fintech companies to prediction markets, which are mass consumer. What are they doing when it comes to what the mass consumer products and apps and platforms from the previous generation or two have done the best with their own flavor and adding on top the sort of foundational layer if there is a blockchain component, if there is a Web3 component, etc. So I think we're going to see more and more these unique combinations of Web 2 and Web 3 come together, but obviously can go into more detail in that regard.
Yeah.
But also it relates to the people
Yeah.
and their respective experiences.
Yeah. Cool. And so all of this, how long did you write this newsletter for? How long have you been doing Web3 with TPan?
Yeah. So April 2022. So 3.5 years.
3.5 years. And you've grown it from 0 to like 7,
Yeah,
8K
just about,
subscribers?
yeah, just to 8K subs, and like I think it was something like 2K followers on the
And
Substack follower piece.
what was that like? How did you do that? Like, what was that solopreneur, solo creator journey like? Was
Yeah,
it
yeah,
really just a
yeah.
hobby project? Did you at some
Yeah.
point consider it to be more of a business? Like what was, tell us the learnings about that little solopreneur journey that you had throughout these 3.5 years.
Yeah. I was on sabbatical. I left my full-time job. I was like, this space is just so interesting. Short of working and eating and sleeping, and so grateful for my wife for just be letting me do my thing and just dive into this hobby and passion. And I would say it was much more than a hobby because, like I said, if I wasn't working my full time job at the time, if I wasn't sleeping or eating, I was just on X. I was in Discord. I was just trying out different products, buying and selling NFTs, and just exploring that whole space. And then also doing other things in the broader on chain ecosystem. So it got to a point where I was like, how am I spending so much time and not just diving a little further? So I went on sabbatical, and the Monday after my last day um, at my full time job, I just thought, hey, why don't I just write something? I've been meaning to write something for years, and for me, I've built up this habit of just journaling at least every week, and I still do every week or so. Today, I've been doing this since probably middle school or so.
Hmm.
So I realized, okay, I've always wanted to write and just share my thoughts and how I'm feeling. But of course, if I'm openly doing it, maybe something a little bit more applicable versus all the intimate details of my personal life. And I finally found a topic I was super passionate about. And then my hypothesis was, why not combine that with my professional background? I didn't really see anyone else talking about the interesting things happening in growth and marketing related to Web3,
Yeah.
blockchain, and crypto. And if
And I
there's
think
if
even
there's a
to
gap
this,
to be filled,
even to
Why
this
not?
day, right? There's not a ton of content. I
Yeah.
mean, this is. I mean, I'm not like approaching it with OGC like from a
Yeah.
writing perspective that much, but it's kind of it's the same motivation. Like I see just this big gap, and a big gap of expertise, knowledge sharing, and community, frankly, in that regard, in like growth and marketing.
Yeah.
So how did you like? How did you approach it? Like, did you have like a content framework in mind? Like, I'm wondering, like, because I think it is kind of special that you took this niche, and I loved your analysis. Actually, like it was part of my research on this whole topic as well. It's like, how did you how did you approach picking topics? What interested you? And also maybe share what is your top three pieces of content that you shared over the course of the year.
So I think one, when it comes to just the act of creating or being a creator, I think everyone has it in them. I think I'm a perfect case of that because I literally did nothing. And then suddenly, like publicly, or like, hey, I have a blog, I have an Instagram account that, I want to publicly create some theme of content, whether it's just for entertainment or for work. I was never that person, but I just had this hypothesis and maybe a lens to my background where I'm just like, hey, I have this idea, I want to test it, and I just need to be at the right place, right time, right life situation, so to say. For me, it took being on a sabbatical to do that, and for some other people, it's a similar thing. But some other people could just do it as a side thing. I know you're working on a lot of things at once, and that's awesome. I'm a little less like that. I'm not as good on that front, to be honest. But I had this opportunity. I was like, let's just do it. Let's see. And because this is evidence based from my personal experience, I was like, okay, I already journal. I've maybe written one thing on LinkedIn, just like a very personal, but tied it to the professional aspect. And it just went viral at the time on LinkedIn. And I was just one and done.
What
And
was the post about?
I got laid off. I think it
Oh,
was like 8 years ago. It was, just like it was a really good experience. But then I just shared personally that, right? So I
mhm.
think that was a seed of like, okay, how can I, in a slightly more thematic way, share personal experiences, but also tie that to my professional background or life. And maybe it doesn't have to be that personal. And then that was one of the inklings that, like, okay, well, what if I replace being laid off, which is like a hopefully one time thing, to something more professional, but also allows me to give my personal take. So I realized, okay, I want to talk about the intersection of growth, Web3, crypto on chain, and then also insert my own personal flavor, experience, and my style, which is I also insert memes, humor. I like to explain things in simpler terms. So regardless of even if you're an expert, you're like, oh, this is a good way to explain this. I already know it, and he's actually not being 100% correct. And I'm not going. My goal isn't to be 100% correct. My goal is to help you understand a concept more effectively, and then you figure out the exact details, right? Or if you're a newbie, you're like, I understand it. Great, right? So I think the combination of all those things helped me to better understand what is the type of framework or the content style for myself. And this was pre ChatGPT and much more effective AI tools. So from start to finish or zero to completion, and this is what I was alluding to a little bit. I think the other thing that certain people will find out is one, you obviously got to try it out, have a hypothesis, like I'm gonna do it, maybe even just, go all out and just see if it works or doesn't. Or it's like it's a little bit more hypothesis driven. I just feel like I'm always good at this. I've never really tested it in a content creator format. Then it's also like, do you have a knack for it? Right. All of us can write. All of us can write one of my blog posts, right? But do certain people enjoy it more than others? Are certain people more efficient at it than others? Are certain people just able to do it in a way that they could write 300 of these, 400 of these in 3 years? Then that number, that funnel, because they're growth people, right? That funnel gets a lot smaller. And for everyone, when it comes to content creation, everyone can do it. But like, what's your version where you are the 0.1% plus your own personal flavor that makes it stand out that very, very few other people can do? And because I sort of had these hypotheses and sort of tested this out and got certain traction, and I was passionate, which allowed me to really push it to a degree where I was like, oh, this to get to the point where there was traction. Otherwise, I would have given up in a week, right? Why would I spend all this time or effort? I was passionate. So I didn't care as much about I need to get the first 100 first 1,000, that traction sort of happened as a compliment. And I was like, that's validation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, it happened to be that intersection of topics, long form, on Substack, and just being consistent because of all those things, right? So what is that for every single person if they want to test out content, do content? I think that last piece is definitely becoming more and more important. Do you have a unique voice? Because if you don't have that, either people are going to assume it's AI, it's not going to be that interesting. You don't put in a little bit of a personal story behind it, or like, I did this thing and this is what I think about it. And to your point, like there aren't really other newsletters on the growth intersection with Web3 and crypto. There is a lot of good content out there, not necessarily on the newsletter side. There's a lot more on X. You're doing OGC, which is awesome. We've chatted about that. I followed along to your podcast, and there's more of that type of content. But yeah, I'm just like, okay, I'm taking a break. Like, there's no one in the newsletter space doing long form, probably because harder to monetize, all that stuff. I'm like, I hope someone could take that mantle, or I'll work with them or whatever.
Yeah, we should chat about
But
this.
yeah.
We should chat about this.
Oh,
Maybe
okay. Okay, let's chat. Yeah, let's
let's
chat.
let's set up an editorial team here. But I wanted to before we move on. I mean, there's a lot to talk about there. But before we maybe like move on into like what you're doing nowadays, walk us through some examples of content that you put out that stood out. Like what types of
Yes.
analysis
I didn't even get to that
resonated?
yet. Oh my
What types of
gosh.
analysis is related the most? Like just like what comes to mind? Like what was a very special analysis or like essay that you did? So just
Yeah.
to wrap that up a little bit, to
Yes,
double click on the content
totally. I
that you
didn't
did.
even get to that yet. Thank you for getting back to that. I think there's two categories of content when you're asking that question, like what did you really enjoy? What do you think was really impactful? What were your favorite? I think there are sort of two categories. One's on the more in the moment, ephemeral. Maybe ephemeral meaning not like it only lasted a month or something. It might have lasted, had waves over the course of a couple of years. Might even come back in a few years. And then there's the other category where it's like much more long time horizon, right? It's much more thematic, that it probably is going to be very, very high confidence going to happen, but don't know who, don't know exactly how, and don't know maybe which companies, let's say a Fortune 500 or an institution, will adopt and really push forward, right? It needs like a quote unquote executive sponsor from like to adopt it, and then they have the distribution to make it mainstream versus more niche. So the first category, one of my favorite was, and it was actually one of the most engaged, and I had a much smaller audience at the time, when I was talking about meme coins and why they're so interesting, why they even catch fire, how they even get viral, what makes a good meme. It was about the WIF, dog with hat,
Mhm.
WIF meme coin. And we're looking back. I mean, I got super into it. I did some trading, lost a bunch of money. But also it was a really good experience just to even understand what was going on to a degree. But that was really fun because I was actually dissecting the meme itself and explaining why it was so interesting and why the meme itself got so viral. So it wasn't just a lesson in like meme coins, but it was also like memes itself and why, for myself, like, why is this meme catching fire? Why is it so good? Right. And I think that's really important for anyone in social or even in growth to understand, right? How can you apply that to what you're doing? Not the same way, hard to make a whiff type of meme success. But I thought that was really fun and like ephemeral to a degree. But I think there's a lot of nuggets, regardless of where you are, regardless of meme coins being dead or you think there's still hope there. There's something to learn from that. The other one is incentive structures. And I think there's a couple that, again, I think people are being a lot more thoughtful, and maybe it'll come back in terms of the frenzy of airdrops and how you do it. But one was the Blast L2
Mhm.
blockchain and how I think I called it like the 7-layer burrito, or like seven ways that the Blast TGE airdrop actually sort of leveraged all the different layers of incentivization to make them have such a loud um, arrival, I guess, on the timeline in terms of TVL and all those different things. So even though that should not be copied, at least today, there's so many elements that make it interesting, and there is a 2026 and beyond version of that will work. Right? It's
Mhm.
all about the timing and all the other elements. On the longer term horizon type of content that I did One was about stablecoins, and everyone knows stablecoins are here. Like, I get that. But I think I was thinking a little bit more prospectively. What does it mean for consumers, and why
Mm.
is it beneficial for consumers? And I sort of laid out multiple examples and themes that will, maybe in months, maybe in years, be very, very applicable to them in regards to the benefits there. Because being in a developed country, or like I'm in the US, who cares about stablecoins? I'm already using the US dollar. But the reality is there's a lot more things that can be done that benefits the consumers and that will incentivize companies and stablecoin issuers from the brand side and the operational side, not the institutional side, but them too, if they're banks and issuing. That will help them grow. You just have to be creative, you have to be open and understand what the technology enables, right?
Mm.
So that's one. I'd say another one is loyalty. I
Yeah.
still do not think that has been truly understood by the larger players. And it's really cool to see a lot of the smaller grassroots efforts, obviously on the crypto blockchain native side. I think just loyalty has so much to be cracked with blockchain, even NFTs, right? There's an application there that gets interesting, but is scary for some. And I think those are multi-year bets, multi-year experiments, for lack of a better word, and multi-year unlocks in terms of what will happen.
Cool. So you've spent the last 3.5+ years covering more or less nerdy, in-depth analysis on growth topics, and now you kind of switched gears because you're now with the Milk Road, and I think Milk Road is at least from my perspective, like has a different audience, right? It's more like investment
Yeah,
topics, crypto as an asset class, not as much like crypto as a platform and an
yeah,
application platform, but more like crypto as an asset class. That's at least how I see it. So how did this come along? How did you end up
yeah,
at Milk Road?
yeah. So, as a content creator and someone that wrote long form newsletter, I got connected with other newsletter writers, operators, and creators in the space, and over the years kept a relationship with them. And one of those folks is now they're the owners of Milk Road, the brand, the platform, the content. And we just stayed in touch over the years, and I was a guest on their podcast a couple times, sharing the crazy things going on in Web3 growth and examples, and that was fun. And it was just right time, right place in terms of having the conversations. I think one thing that helped me personally was if I were to consider taking a pause on Web3 with TPan, the newsletter and blog, uh, I wanted to keep that spark alive somehow. And with Milk Road, they are a media brand and media platform. There's multiple newsletters, there's multiple podcasts. We're putting a lot more effort on the sort of video podcast side of things, seeing a lot of growth there. And that sort of was a perfect fit where if I'm not going to be writing for myself, I would, and I'm not writing for someone else, I'm working within that general space on the
Hmm.
media side. And I think emerging media is still very, very interesting, especially for emerging topics. And in this case with Milk Road, it's investing in emerging tech. So not quite the application specifically, although we definitely touch upon that a lot because there's that overlap, but more investing in emerging tech. So primarily, Milk Road started in, I think, late 2021, early 2022, was more focused on the general Web3 space and then shifted its focus gradually to investing in crypto. So there's the crypto newsletter, then there's macro, which is understanding the high level backdrop, because if you're buying or selling a stock or currency, or crypto, the background of what's going on has a large impact. So there's macro, and then the last piece, at least based on this recording, so tomorrow, so Wednesday, December 3rd, we will be launching our AI newsletter, so investing in AI. So we're super excited about that, and that's why I say emerging tech. So crypto
Hmm.
is a foundation, but broadening that to investing in emerging tech, with AI and crypto being those two pillars.
Cool. And Milk Road as a business, or like as a company, where does it stand today? You said you're around
Yeah.
a good dozen people. You said you mentioned an owner. So like what's the structure of the team? Like who's owning the media company, and apparently you're now kind of expanding your themes, which is kind of giving a little bit of a hint that growth potential within crypto might still be pretty limited. So I'm reading this there maybe a little bit, but
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about that. Yeah.
yeah. So how do you like how do you see Milk Road as a company? I mean, I've been reading the newsletter for a long time. I follow the
Oh,
podcast, but yeah,
awesome.
curious to hear about the business, the company. Where does it stand? Where
Yeah,
is it going?
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I'll talk about the structure first for Milk Road. The way I think about it and describe it is there's three brands, and I touched upon them already. So you have AI, crypto, and macro, right? I already sort of talked about how those three complement each other, and this was sort of an evolution over the past year. And since I joined, I've been at the company for about 6 weeks now. What saw the tail end of that evolution, I think a lot of it was already in play. But of course, Milk Road is a startup for all intents and purposes. It is a media company, but in terms of how it operates and things like that, it really is a startup. Super freaking fast. And I'm like, oh man, okay. I just viewed it when I joined and was in conversations like as more of a media company first, but it's a media company that is a startup, right? So AI, crypto, macro, and under each there are two channels. And what I mean by that is a newsletter and podcast, right? So you have six different sort of properties under three brands. So for example, AI podcast, AI newsletter, macro podcast newsletter, crypto podcast newsletter, crypto being the foundational piece and also the oldest and the most mature, so to say. So that's how we sort of operate. And then from a functional standpoint, we have people working on the newsletter and podcast, and then you have hosts that sort of either focus on one piece of that, or creators, let's say, because they could be hosts, writers, etc., or all that. On top of that, from a product perspective, there's a bifurcation here where there's free and pro, right? So actually taking a quick step, there's free and pro. So with free, all the free content, subscribe to the newsletter, go on YouTube, watch all the content. It's actually pretty good. And I'm saying pretty good versus just like, oh, it's like we're the best, because like I'm saying that more objectively because I do listen to many other content brands in the space. I read newsletters from across the space. I just do a lot of consumption too. And Milk Road content's really good. And I forgot to mention, they were one of literally two other newsletters I knew at the time when I started and started to see some traction on my newsletter where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only person that writes a newsletter that combines humor with actual informative insights. Like that's validation actually. And obviously Milk Road became what it is because of some of that secret sauce. And kudos to all the people who have helped the Milk Road newsletter get to where it is in terms of writing that, because that's really, really hard. And you had to have that natural talent to a degree to be able to do that. But back to free and pro, we have the free product, all the free content, and then the pro membership, where you get pro content. We have exclusive pro community. We do AMAs. We share a lot of insights, and you have full access to our research team, who are also the creators as well. And that is a subscription based product, right? We also are beefing out a lot of our data and analytics pieces on our website. So it's basically turning into a member portal with all these different perks and benefits. And we have a good number in the mid thousands of these subscribers, really forming a very robust community around crypto, macro, and AI. So that's sort of the
And these don't
two sides of
overlap
the
though, right?
business.
So
They Mhm.
these are all separate products, separate communities, right?
Oh no, they're combined. So it
Okay,
depends on your
okay,
membership.
okay,
Yeah. So and
right.
there's different tiers of the membership on AI, crypto, and macro. And
Hmm.
so I sort of touched upon that pro membership piece. So on the free content side, of course, there's sponsorships, there's ads, there's revenue coming in there. So we're a little more unique, and there are other companies out there that do this, but not all media brands and platforms do this, where we have two major revenue streams, and one is from the subscription, pro membership, upgrade, upsell, etc. And then you have the free content, which is ad supported and ad driven, revenue driven there. So it's effectively a freemium model on the content, which again, if you go back to Web 2, very, very common. Web 3, it happens, but isn't necessarily the default for various reasons. And also, it's just much more nascent in that regard. So that's sort of the structure of how we view our content. And there's, of course, a lot of cross promo, cross pollination there. And then the monetization operational piece.
Cool. And so you said you've only joined like 6 weeks ago, and so you're quite fresh, but I'm sure you have a bunch of thoughts on like how to grow this thing. So how do you approach growing that media business? Like, what's your focus
Yeah.
areas? What are you excited about in terms of opportunities? What are you worried about in terms
Yeah.
of
Yep. Yep.
damn,
Yep.
can I crack that? So like, how do you approach
Yep.
growth at Milk Road now?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I feel like we need a part two episode of this recording to get into more
That's
detail.
usually
Maybe
the
we will.
case.
Maybe we
That's
will. Maybe in like
we
3 to
should.
6 months. But I want to first address a part of the question you asked earlier, which I didn't touch upon, where you made the comment like, oh, you're expanding, you're doing macro, that makes sense. AI, that also makes sense, but you're not focusing solely on crypto. Does that suggest that there's headwinds there or whatnot? And frankly, to a degree, yes, to a degree, right? And why do I say that with nuance? Because I believe, and part of the reason why I joined Milk Road is because I believe there are a lot of different opportunities that have not been unlocked yet. So I think if everything stayed steady state, and again, we're a startup, of course, we're not going to do that. Yes, there certainly are headwinds. And let's say for something that's more investing adjacent along with industry, like that's across the industry, that covers the industry from its content and media perspective, you would think that there's a lot of headwinds, especially price being a very large driver of sentiment, like
Yeah.
actual liquidity, other things. But we're actually doing fairly well despite that, I would say, and there is actually growth, which is crazy. While you can't say the same for every other company operating or adjacent to this industry because of everything going on. So that's a really, really positive sign. I think, and this applies to the other brands and channels that we're doing it on. But I think even looking at crypto, I think there are a lot of network effects. And it's easy to say this in a broad, sweeping way, but I'll say this in a broad, sweeping way: partnerships that have not been explored between industry operating participants, and let's just say the whole gamut. I won't get too specific, and platforms and audiences like Milk Roads. I'll put
Hmm.
it that way. And there's obvious ones where, like, hey, if you want to make something work out tomorrow, well, talk to our head of sales. I'll introduce
Yeah.
you right now. But I do think there is certainly something from a partnerships lens that is interesting and where there allows for a little bit more creativity. And that's where I'm spending more of my time. And I'll say this on this episode because I know the audience for OGC and is probably more my type of people in this regard. But if you want to work with Milk Road in a more creative way than purely a sponsorship, and that certainly is a component that can be discussed, to be clear, but that's not my day-to-day MO. And you want to partner with us in some way, I'm your guy. And that's where growth can get very creative and sort of span the whole every single channel to more creative conversations or partner oriented conversations. So I'll leave it at that. If you're in the space and you want to work with Milk Road in some way or partner together with our audience in a creative way and we could chat details, reach out to me. I'm sure the details will be, in this episode in the description or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. We'll put that in the show notes. Um, yeah, so still so many topics that I would like to touch on, but maybe let's wrap it up with one last question on your latest endeavor that you shared earlier, which is expanding the Milk Road universe into the AI space or investing in AI space. Do you want to chat a little bit about that? How do you guys address this? How do you see that space? Yeah, just curious about your expansion to the space before we wrap it up.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned earlier thematically, Milk Road has expanded into a resource and platform for investing in emerging tech. And the most obvious one over the past several years has been crypto and has been that foundation. And now we're expanding into AI, we're 100% still dedicating all our existing resources from the crypto side to crypto, but now we're just expanding into AI, right? And that becomes a really strong two-headed beast. You add in macro, it's actually a three-headed beast. Um, and with AI, what we've learned is there's a large overlap of interest in, okay, well, everyone's talking about the Mag 7, NVIDIA saving the global economy every quarter with its earnings report, right? And it's sort of too hard to ignore in regards to the fact that there is so much interest, there's so much capital flowing there, to even coming from crypto to a degree. And I think our team and leadership has realized that we're seeing a version of what we saw in crypto, Web3, NFTs, et cetera, in 2021. And that's how Milk Road came to where it is today, its claim to fame, so to say. And there is that opportunity for AI. And we can do that from the investing angle. There are plenty of great AI newsletters. One that I followed, The Neuron, shout out to them, that I followed for multiple years since their inception, covering the AI landscape. But we're focused more on the investing angle. And there's certainly a lot of content, a lot of sort of blue ocean in regards to content related to that. And these audiences are actually very complementary. And also, again, I always see, and one thing that I valued and saw in Milk Road is like, is this a platform, brand, opportunity that can help onboard more people into this space? Specifically talking more about Web3 crypto blockchain. And now it's cross promoting through AI, but it goes both ways, right? And you could say it's waxing and waning or ebbs and flows and the pendulum swings back and forth. Like, AI is more popular than crypto. I think everyone can objectively agree to that.
Yeah.
But depending on what happens and the themes that come, crypto will become more popular again or be integrated in ways where people will be naturally more curious to learn more about crypto, how to invest in that. Should I buy Bitcoin or not? And then that audience gets cross promoted a little bit more heavily across the other way too. So that's where these become very complementary and interesting for our audience, which is who are interested in investing in emerging tech in general.
Yeah, yeah. And who knows, maybe these experiments with tokenizing private
Exactly.
AI companies are gonna mature and are
Yep.
gonna sustain. So there you would have your perfect
So
overlap.
tokenization, which is that overlap too, and that's a great point to sort of tie that together, where then that's a topic for both.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Let's wrap it up. TPan, was so great to chat with you, to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time. Maybe yeah, tell the people where they can find you on X.
Yeah. TPan with 4 underscores. I'm a Pudgy Penguin. Big Pudgy Penguin fan still. Yeah, they're gonna be a big brand is my belief and thesis on that front. Many favorite actually top. Oh my gosh, how did I forget them? Pudgy Penguins. I've written about them so many times.
I saw
But
that.
you know, some of my favorite pieces there. TPan underscore 4 times. Pudgy Penguin profile pic. Otherwise, go to milkroad.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, TPan, and yeah, we'll catch up soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, Norman.
Bye bye.